I'd like to say welcome to our 2022 Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia Awareness event. My name is Catherine Shepard, and I'm the Community Coordinator in Cape Breton, and I'm host this evening. So it's my face and voice that will walk us through the session this evening. Thank you for welcoming us into your home tonight as we come together to learn and to share. I always suggest that if you'd like to have a pen and a paper close by, so if something strikes you as helpful, an idea or a phone number, you'll have something close by that you can jot it down. We know that it's been close to 2 years since we began preparing and responding to COVID. We know that you are tired, and we want to say thank you for all that you have done to keep safe and to keep those that you're caring for safe. We know that stress and fatigue are very real, and we want you to know that we hear you and we're here to help. To start with, I'd like to acknowledge that although we are meeting in a virtual world, we are gathered together this evening on sacred land that has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. We are in Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we acknowledge them as the past, the present, and the future caretakers of this land. January is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and our theme this year is It's Never Too Early or Too Late to Connect with Us. Our talk tonight focuses on dementia and why we should get a diagnosis. And we are over the moon at how wonderful the response has been to tonight's event. At this point, we have more than 400 people, can you believe that number, registered for the event, people joining us from across the province and across the country. As hard as it is to not be together in person, being together in this virtual world allows us to come together and connect so widely that it's exciting to see and be part of it. Just like you, our audience, our speakers are also joining us from across the province, from Cape Breton to the HRN and from Digby. So this truly is a provincial event. When looking to come up with a theme for this year's event, we look to see what people are asking for, and there are always so many questions about getting a diagnosis. We thought this was a really great fit. We know that this journey is hard for persons with dementia and their families. There is still stigma associated with this diagnosis, and so many people can shy away from talking about dementia, and this only adds to the isolation that people can feel. I hope that knowing that there are so many of us here tonight coming together to learn and hear and share resources lets you know that you are not alone. And I hope everyone here can feel that support. Over the course of the last 2 years, we know that people with dementia and their families have needed our support more than ever. We, like everyone else, had to be brave and creative to work to reach people in new and different ways. With so much in-person programming still on hold, we put extra effort into our InfoLine services to ensure that it was available and able to meet your needs. If you haven't heard about InfoLine, it's a toll-free number that allows you to connect with an educated and trained Alzheimer's Society staff. Not only is this a one-time call, but it can be an ongoing call if that's what you want or need. You'll notice the number that is on our screen now. Our behind the scenes support today have put that up so that we can all share it. And that's the number that you can call if you would like to connect to us. We've adapted many of our programs for a virtual delivery like we're doing tonight. We have a monthly live education event where you can log in and join and ask our speakers questions. And if you can't make the time that we have them, then feel free to go to our website, because we've created a library of more than 50 events that will allow you to go back and watch, maybe rewatch, or even share with family and friends. So at any point that suits your needs, that's the library for you. And if you're wondering when the next one is going to happen, well, it's coming along soon in February, the 17th to be exact. And it's going to be the geriatrician, Dr. Melissa Andrew, as our speaker. So if that's something that you would like to register for, or just know a little bit more about, you can head to our website, or again, call that 1-800 number that you can see on your screen now. Just like this event, other programs you'll hear more about this evening, like our Family Caregiver series, our support groups, Artful Afternoon, and Shaping the Journey, all of these programs have been happening in a virtual world. And even though it's been a learning curve for all of us, like figuring out where the mute button is, how to use the Q&A box, and in my house, even taking the cat off the keyboard, there has been great success. Please, if you would like to join or hear more, just call us. You may have also seen that we've put extra effort into connecting with you on social media. So keep your eyes open, because if you're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, there's information and support there from us as well. Now, before we go too far into tonight's sessions, we would like to get to know you a little bit more. What's going to happen now is you're going to see a poll come up on your screen. And if you're able to, please tick off the answer that best describes you. This is a practice poll to find out who's joining us and to get you kind of warmed up for a poll that we'll see at the end of the evening. The answers from this poll and the one at the end will help us pick some topics for upcoming education that are most important to you and the people we want to support. So take a moment now and share your thoughts. If you're new to doing these, don't worry. Like I said earlier, it's a learning curve for all of us, and you'll see tonight everyone has learning curves. So wow, you can see as this is happening and the poll is happening and those numbers are changing, you can see that we have all kinds of people that are joining us from across the province and all kinds of different groups of people that are here. There's someone from the Valley. And there's someone who's a Cape Bretoner like me, so welcome aboard, and I'm happy to see that. It's great to see so many people. And we even have people from outside of the province too. It's amazing when you look at over 200 people taking part in these polls. It's just so exciting when you see these numbers start to go up and up, because these are the numbers and information that we're going to take to make sure as we move forward, we're reaching the information that's so important to you. And so that's why it's so great to see people taking part in this poll. So thank you for that. And I think we're probably doing pretty good there. Wonderful. We have all kinds of, that's fantastic. So you can see in this poll, we have persons living with dementia joining us. We have persons who are care partners. We have health professionals, and then we have people that are just really interested, because I think that's what's so important, right? When you have questions, this is where you want to come, right? Wanting to make sure that we're able to get as many questions answered for you as we can tonight. Okay, so before we get to our guest speakers, the next person I would like to welcome and say a few words is John Britton. John is the CEO of the Alzheimer's Society, and he has some interesting and exciting information to share with you about some of the other things that we're going to talk about. Hi, John. It's great to see you.
Hi, Catherine. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for such a lovely, thoughtful and warm introduction, as always. And just to pick up on your message in there, I was actually going to dial in from home tonight, but I decided to come to the office. Speaking of learning about virtual issues, I've had tech issues all day and then wanted to avoid having to lift a cat off my own keyboard. So I'm joining you from the ASNS office this evening. So again, thanks, Catherine, for a great introduction. And it really is a pleasure to see so many people from so many different parts of the province and indeed across the country this evening as we gather to acknowledge our Awareness Month panel. I'd like to begin this evening's event by extending sincere thanks to our panelists. Really, really kind of you to share your expertise and to share your experiences with us today. So thank you for that. And a huge thank you to the ASNS staff team who continue to do incredible work navigating this crazy world that we're living in right now. Really, really proud of the fact that we're able to remain so connected to our communities. We know it's not ideal. We can't wait to get back to seeing you in person, but it is great that we have the opportunity to remain so connected to so many people from so many different places. So I'll begin tonight by picking up on a few points that Catherine has picked up on today. And you'll have to excuse me 1 second here. My slideshow is not advancing. Talk about tech challenges in our new world. It's important to start off tonight by just acknowledging that we're still very much in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're still very much learning as we go. And when I say we, I mean the royal we, all of us, whether it's professional or personal, we are all learning every single day. The challenges remain, and the nature of those challenges are constantly shifting. And I think we're all feeling that fatigue that Catherine mentioned earlier tonight. We're finding new things about the virus every day and new ways to live with it. One of our greatest learnings at the Society has been that all of the issues that COVID has presented, surprisingly few of them are new issues. What we have found is that most of them are issues that we already knew about, that you already knew about. It's just that COVID has presented them in such a way that we can no longer ignore them. We can no longer paper over those cracks. But it has been interesting. The issues that we're seeing are just extensions of issues that we've known for many, many years. Those issues are things such as long-term care, staffing and visitation protocols, issues such as lack of education for care staff, and more importantly, lack of support for those that are working in that sector at this most challenging of times. Issues of isolation, issues of lack of access to appropriate care services. And I think it's fair to say issues of lack of physician access and issues of access to a timely diagnosis, which ironically is one of the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. And as I've said, none of these are new, but through the lens of COVID, we can no longer ignore them. What we will say though, and now my slides are advancing, which is great, is that here at the Alzheimer's Society, we don't shy away from the challenges, we rise to them. And we're also able to see some silver linings. And we think it's important to look for those silver linings at a time like this. We're not connecting with as many people as we connected to in person, but we're connecting with different people. And even more excitingly, we're connecting with people that haven't connected with us before or haven't been able to connect with us before. People are watching our content at 3 o'clock in the morning because that's the time that works for them, because we now have an online resource library. So there are some benefits to the experiences that we've all gone through in the last 2 years. Like I said, the nature of those services means that that resource library is available. So to Catherine's point, please do check out our website. There's a wealth of education sessions, even our caregiver education series. Those things are all available now on our online resource library. So while we're really, really keen to doing what we do best is returning to in-person programs, and we are looking to do that as soon as is safe and as soon as is possible, it is important to recognize that we are well connected, and we will continue to leverage the talents of our team to continue providing as many virtual services as we possibly can. So what we'd like to, and it's important to maintain a sense of hope and positivity for this evening, it's really important that we do acknowledge some realities. We can't ignore them. The first reality is that as much as we're doing great work in the online region, online services don't work for everybody. Some people don't have the skill to go online. Some people don't have the equipment. Some people don't have the internet access. And some people just don't like it. They just don't like being virtual, and we've got to respect that. It's also important to recognise that we are now looking at over 80,000 Nova Scotians that do not have a family physician. So that's something that's really critical, especially as we're talking about the importance of a timely diagnosis. Not only do that huge number of people not have a physician, access to services, whether that's physician services or other, in non-urban areas is also, it was a problem before COVID, it's even more of a problem now. I'd even argue that we could take non-urban out of there. I know that people that live in urban areas struggle to access the appropriate services in a timely manner. And again, the diagnosis is important. A timely diagnosis is important because we all know that the earlier that you can intervene and the earlier that you can get support, the better the outcomes for everybody. And then finally, something that we're really focused on at the Society and have been for a number of years is access to culturally appropriate support. We live in an incredibly diverse country and an incredibly diverse province, and we need to make sure that the service offerings that we have are available and culturally appropriate to everybody that would like to access them. So that will be another challenge that we are ready to rise to this year. And speaking of rising to challenges, just to give you a little overview of how we're approaching them. So right now we're in the middle of a very intensive strategic planning process. This will set the course for ASNS for the next 5 years and will tell us where we need to specifically focus to have the greatest impact going forward. Part of our strategic plan will be a commitment to advancing core advocacy issues. We do advocacy in every single thing that we do, every phone call we make, every client we interact with, but it's very individualized for that person. One thing we know that we need to start doing more of is more systemic level advocacy. That's the only way we're going to have some positive outcomes for things like those long-term care visitation protocols and staffing protocols that we talked about, physician access, all of those challenges we just looked at. We will not be ignoring what we're already doing. We need to do more of it. We need to expand and refine those services that we currently offer. We have 13 of our 14 program streams available online, and we work with people with a dementia diagnosis, their care partners, and also healthcare providers. And we also do a significant amount of public education. We know that we need to do more. And as I was just talking about, we will be formally launching our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategy in the summer of 2022. So we can't wait to share those details with everybody. And then the final piece that we're going to be focused on for 2022 and beyond is the reduction of stigma by leveraging community supports. And we're talking specifically about a nationwide initiative that we're keen to get off the ground in Nova Scotia called Dementia Friendly Communities. And that is working with public service sector, retail, public services, transit, to make sure that all of those services that are available to the general public have a baseline understanding of how to engage with folks with a dementia diagnosis, so we can help people to remain in place for as long as possible. So just a little snapshot there of what we're doing at the Society. And one thing I do want to draw your attention to before we move into the main panel event for the evening is, as part of our current strategic planning process, which, as I've mentioned, is pretty intense, we are doing community consultations, and they are starting on February the 2nd in Cape Breton. They are virtual. We were hoping to do them in person, but given the state of the situation, we think virtual is best, but we do want to make them region specific. So as part of the wrap up for tonight, when you receive the follow-up email, we will be sending you a link for all of the community consults. And please do feel free to register and attend the one that's appropriate to you. It is really, really important that we gather and collect community voices as much as possible as part of our planning process. So that brings me to the end of our introduction this evening. I will hand us back to our MC for the evening, Catherine, who will get our panel underway. Thank you, everybody. Have a great event, and I'll hand you over to Catherine. Thank you.
Super. Thanks so much, John. Some wonderful acknowledgement and wonderful ideas of community support that you shared. And it's just so great to have you here with us this evening. So here we go. Tonight, we are honored to have 3 special guests from one end of our province to the other. I'm going to let you know a little bit about each of them, and then each one will speak. After everyone has given their talk and shared their knowledge, all 3 of the guests will then share their screens, and we'll come back together and we'll start to ask any of the questions that you may have thought about while each one was speaking. You'll notice that your cameras and microphones are turned off, and we've done that to provide the best sound quality and to ensure that there's confidentiality for you all. So if, as we go through the session, you have any questions, so from any of the speakers that have come up, if as they're talking, you think about a question and you use that pen and paper that I suggested earlier and you jot it down, or if you want, you can always go to that Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And that's the one we're going to use tonight. So if you hover near the bottom of your screen, you'll see like that little bubble and it'll say Q&A. And that's the one that we'll use. You can go into that area. You can type the question that comes up as the speaker is talking. And then make sure you press enter or return. And that will then get sent to our behind the scenes support to see that, you know, we can put it in the queue to get some support and answers back to you. Okay. So again, if as our speakers are talking, you have any questions that come up that you're wondering about or something that you think about, go to that Q&A box at the bottom, type it in, press send or return, and it'll come to us. Okay. So now for our speakers. I'll introduce them in the order that you're going to see them tonight. There are more complete bios for each of the speakers available on our website. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about them than what I'm going to share now, please head to that website. And I invite you to have a peek there, and that'll let you know a little bit more about who they are. Once I'm done, I will also turn my mic and camera off, and then I'll join you at the end when our speakers come back to answer all the questions. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Arlene Kelly-Wiggins as our first speaker. Dr. Arlene Kelly-Wiggins followed her passion for geriatrics and palliative care, which led her to specialize in geriatric medicine. Since 2018, she has been supporting Nova Scotians living in Cape Breton at her Sydney clinic. Our second speaker tonight is Sheree Reynolds. Sheree and her husband Doug are the parents of 2 adult children and have been married for 40 years. They are navigating the new reality of dementia together. And our final guest speaker of this evening is Dawn Thomas. Dawn has worked for the past 14 years with the Senior Safety Program and the RCMP. Her passion for dementia and advocacy for caregivers stems not only from her work, but also from her personal experience in caring for her mom. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Dr. Arlene Kelly-Wiggins to join us so she can turn her camera and her mic on. And as we're waiting, Dr. Wiggins is also going to load a PowerPoint, so you'll be able to see some of her slides as she joins us tonight from her Sydney clinic. We were talking earlier. We've done our best to try to minimize any background. So Dr. Wiggins has decided to stay in her Sydney clinic with her door closed so that she'll have few interruptions, hopefully. And then that way you'll be able to take advantage of the wonderful knowledge that she has. Let's just see, she's getting those slides all set up. It looks fantastic from my end.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm Arlene Kelly-Wiggins. I'm a consultant in geriatrics and care of the elderly. And I'm grateful, Catherine, for the invitation to speak tonight. Catherine asked me to speak specifically about a timely diagnosis in dementia. I have no disclosures or competing interests that would have any effect on this talk tonight. So I thought I'd start with a basic definition or discussion about dementia. So as a memory specialist, I get asked a number of times a week about just what is the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's, for instance. So dementia is a medical diagnosis. We describe it as an umbrella term where someone has significant memory problems or problems with thinking and cognition, such that their day-to-day routines have been affected. Alzheimer's disease is one type of dementia, one of the subtypes of dementia, and it's the most common of all the dementia diagnoses. So 50 to 75% of dementia is Alzheimer's type dementia. And like with all subtypes of dementia, your risk for Alzheimer's will increase with age. The second most common type of dementia is vascular dementia, and it's associated with damage to small blood vessels or even larger blood vessels in the brain. And we often see vascular type dementia co-occurring with Alzheimer's dementia in what's called a mixed dementia. The third most common type of dementia is Lewy body dementia. It's often associated with early hallucinations and behavior changes, and there are often Parkinson's type symptoms. So people may have a tremor, may have a stooped and shuffling gait. And then finally, frontotemporal dementia, the fourth most common type of dementia. We often see a younger age of onset, so people can have changes in memory, behavior, and even language as early as their 40s and 50s. Dementia often presents with 10 very common symptoms. So I see these quite frequently in the clinic, and I'll spend a few minutes with describing each of the symptoms. Memory loss that affects your day-to-day function, we consider that the core diagnostic criteria for dementia. As I mentioned before, we consider the memory loss to be significant enough for the diagnosis of dementia when day-to-day routines are impaired. And some people are no longer able to manage their day-to-day routines independently, but have to rely on family or other care partners for significant help and assistance. Often people will tell me that they're struggling more with familiar or routine tasks, and they will say that they're not able to get their taxes together, for instance, or more recently, people are struggling with what goes in the garbage and what goes in the compost bin and what goes in the recycling bin, although they've been doing it for years. Some people come and their memory is fine or the way it's always been, but their initial presentation is a struggle with language and communication. For some people, they struggle with some word finding difficulties. For other people, they have more trouble with understanding what people are saying to them, and often require very simple and direct instructions. Often there's a struggle for orientation in time and place. So they struggle to remember the day and the date, to know the time of day even, or even to reorient themselves in a new place. We consider an impairment in judgment to be a significant symptom, and it's something that we've been paying attention to more recently. People can be especially vulnerable to telephone scams or other forms of dishonesty and fraud. So if we hear that someone has been involved in one of these fraud situations, it makes us all that much more attentive to other changes in memory and functioning. Problems with abstract thinking, in that people are able to think in concrete terms or think in the here and now, but have difficulty with more generalized or broad terms. Misplacing things can be a matter of simply forgetting where you put an item, or having more difficulty adhering to lifelong routines. For instance, you've always put your keys in the same bowl at the front door, but you're struggling more to keep up with those routines. Often, the memory changes come along with some change in mood and behavior. So people may experience depression, anxiety, other mood disorders, or there may be what we call mood lability, where the mood may change within minutes from happy and engaged to sad and irritable or withdrawn. We are especially attentive to mood because depression and anxiety are known to be significantly associated with not only dementia, but other cognitive changes. And sometimes we see changes in personality where previously reserved and reticent people become gregarious, or and extroverted may become more socially withdrawn. This is probably one of the most difficult symptoms that families bring to my attention, is loss of initiative or apathy. They tell me that they feel pain when they see their once active and engaged parent or spouse or partner become more withdrawn and content to spend most of the day watching television or sitting at the table looking out the window. So this is a very difficult symptom for people. If any of these symptoms are present, we encourage people to seek a diagnosis. And the purpose of a diagnosis or an initial assessment would be to first identify and potentially modify any dementia risk factors. So the risk factors for dementia is another talk in and of itself, but if early in presentation we can change anything and modify anything, we would do that. We'd like to get a sense of what your concerns are, what the family concerns are, and to assess and quantify the symptoms. We'd like to, if possible, rule out anything that we could reverse. We may do some medical investigations, blood work, and whatnot. And if we can reverse something, we'd like to get that taken care of early on. For some people, an early or a timely diagnosis gives us an opportunity to establish a cognitive and a functional baseline, so that we know at this time this is how the person was functioning. And often, if we're able to identify the need and provide resources and supports early, that tends to give people a better course in their disease. I'm privileged to work in a dedicated memory clinic. So for us, an assessment involves it's called a comprehensive geriatric assessment. So it's quite an involved and detailed head-to-toe assessment. We start with a history of your memory changes. So we ask some detailed questions, some guided questions about that. And then we go into a medical history. We want to know different surgeries or conditions that you have. We have a good look at medications because we know that sometimes memory changes can be caused by or even made worse by medications. And we always include a physical exam. We want to do a focused neurological exam and assess for any physical issues that may be contributing to memory issues. Some people will need some laboratory testing, and this is where we may look at some blood levels of vitamins or other issues. And for some people, they may have imaging of their brain, so with a CAT scanner and MRI. We do a very thorough set of cognitive tests or memory tests. The mini mental state exam is one you may know, and the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, or the MOCA, is another one we use. And then we take all this information, but we like to know context. So we will ask you about your family history. Does anyone in your family have memory issues? And we want to know about you as a person. So what was your level of education? What did you do for work? What your family structure looks like? Your social history. So we like to make this a holistic, full person assessment if we can. One of the agreed upon principles, or a consensus amongst people in the dementia community, however, is that we have agreed to assess people who are symptomatic. We don't tend to assess or screen asymptomatic people. Unlike, say, in cancer treatment, where someone will have a mammogram even though they don't have any symptoms of breast cancer, or will have colon cancer screening although they don't have any symptoms of colon cancer. As John said, if with an early diagnosis, with a timely diagnosis, we have the opportunity then to begin intervention. You may know that with dementia, there is no known cure, and we don't have treatments even to stop the progression or even reverse the progression. of the memory issues. We do know, however, the medication is helpful with symptoms by slowing down the progression. And while the medication effect may have a limited time, I've seen great benefit in terms of a person's quality of life, and even extending the time that a person is able to live independently or with minimal support by family, and the amount of time that someone can stay at home in the community. Although I don't underestimate the gravity of a diagnosis of dementia, I do see the benefits of getting an early and a timely diagnosis. For some people, there's a sense of relief in having a diagnosis. They're aware of changes in themselves and their memory, and the diagnosis gives them a bit of clarity about what's going on. And while I recognize, again, I'm in a privileged position to be working in a dedicated memory clinic, for a lot of people, they're not able to access specialist memory care, but maybe through the family doctor, they're able to, again, to have more directed care for their memory problems. With an early diagnosis, people tell me that they've been able to be an active participant in their own healthcare decisions. So they're able to sit with family and talk about what's important to them and how they want their future to play out while they still have an opportunity to participate that way. Other people take on an advocacy role. They want to speak for themselves and speak for other people with a dementia diagnosis in the community. And they are now disease experts or experts in this condition so that they can support other families and other patients. Some people are keen to participate in some of the research projects that are going on, and are happy to play their role in advancing the science and the research. I think one of the most important considerations is if you're willing to share your diagnosis, and that will go a long way towards allowing other people to open up about their own condition and their own diagnosis, and hopefully reduce stigma about the disease. So in this last slide, I'll just reiterate, an early diagnosis, while not without serious implications, can still be empowering. And with early intervention, with our medications, with opportunities for education, and opportunities to access resources and supports, I do see people living longer and more independent in the community. And I agree with the Alzheimer's Society. It does take a village to support people living with dementia. That's it for me, Catherine.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And I believe Sheree now is going to jump back in, and she's going to be our second speaker of the evening. Welcome, Sheree.
Thank you, Catherine, and feel very honored to be here tonight and to be asked to participate. And I just want to start off by saying that my participation tonight is the direct result of my husband being willing to share or allow me to share my part of the journey that the two of us are experiencing together. I often say that while we're each of us in our own area dealing with a dementia diagnosis, we're on two separate tracks. I can't experience what my husband is going through in his head and how he feels emotionally and how he is coping with this diagnosis, and he can't take on my concerns for the future and what this looks like. We first started noticing symptoms as a family in 2018. My husband and I at the time were living in Alberta. My husband had transferred there for work with his company. And during our time there, my husband found it very lonely and isolating because our adult children and extended family to a large degree were back in Nova Scotia. We were born and bred Nova Scotians, in particular from Cape Breton. And as a result, he longed to go home. And in 2018, in June of that year, my husband had a number of things happen successively that we had attributed to maybe, his doctor attributed it, not myself, but changes in his behavior. He seemed to be distracted. He didn't seem to be able to follow our conversation. There'd be a lag as to his replies if he was asked a direct question, or he seemed slightly confused as to what was being spoken about, and he would come around and maybe have a reply a little later in the conversation to a topic that has since passed on. He had some physical symptoms of just this sudden onset of fatigue. So when I finally got him to go to his family physician in Calgary, he diagnosed him with depression. He educated us on the fact that there were 12 different symptoms of depression, and he felt that my husband had a physical one. At that point, he went on depression medication. There seemed to be a change. He seemed to have come around, and there was more strength in his voice. He seemed to have more energy, seemed more like himself. And we've since come to realize that at that point, it was probably helping his brain just remain calm because he knew something was up. I think that's probably the thing that is the hardest when you notice changes in your loved ones, but they're not sharing what's going on with them internally, like how they're processing what's happening to them. So there are little pockets of things that got dropped in my lap along the way, but the next biggest one was probably in July of that same year. My daughter called me because my husband had been home visiting, and she said, what's going on with Dad? Like, he doesn't seem himself, and he doesn't seem to be able to follow what we're saying. And I said, well, he's under a lot of stress at work, and then we've had this big family event that's happened that's been very stressful. Just give him some time. Fast forward to 2019, I had been away for a little bit, came home, and noticed a dramatic difference, to the point where I had called my parents when I was coming home from work one day, and I was very distraught. I had noticed symptoms that seemed out of sync with my husband. He had at this point, a very long career in broadcasting. He was extremely eloquent, able to flow very naturally in conversation, whether it was on the air or in interviews or with people. I started noticing that he was retreating a lot to his room and watching television, and he just didn't seem to be himself. And I found out that while I spent some time away, he had weaned himself off the depression medication, thinking that he didn't require it anymore. So he kept saying that I'm having hearing problems. I can't hear properly. So we had that ruled out. And then when it was, I said, we're going back to the doctor. When he went back to his primary care physician, he said that the depression was now moderate, whereas the first time around it had been mild. Now he'd moved into a moderate zone. And I kind of gave him a strange look because I said, well, what about all these symptoms with his speech? Oops, I'm sorry. I didn't touch my mouse and I went blank. Sorry about that. I brought up what's the problem with his speech, and he turned to me and said to me, and this is what I really encourage you as a loved one to be whether it's your partner or your parent, or just someone you care about, their advocate. Because the doctor turned and looked at me and said, I know you think this is depression, I know you think this is dementia, but I'm here to tell you it's not. I have enough experience with dementia patients to know that this is not what your husband's experiencing. Well, as it turns out, moved to 2020, we are home in Nova Scotia, and my husband goes to see his primary care physician, who he had been seeing since his 20s. We were one of those fortunate few that hadn't moved our files. And as soon as he walked in the office and started conversing with his doctor, he did a mini mental on my husband, and then wanted to see him 2 weeks later. And then shortly after that, had ordered a CAT scan. The reason the CAT scan was ordered in my husband's case is I think my husband's doctor had suspected maybe vascular dementia. My husband had suffered since his 20s with atrial fibrillation, so he maybe thought there was some issue related to blood flow. Of course, just as the CAT scan results come back, COVID hit. So everything comes to a screeching halt, all referrals. The waiting list was already obscenely long to get into a neurologist, and we were concerned, what was going to happen next. At that point, a few months had gone by. His doctor had said, I've referred him to a neurologist. And with the language portion, I went back to his doctor and said, is there some way we can see a speech pathologist? And he said, absolutely. So, that was a huge portion in our journey. Allison Gautier, who actually works out of the Cobequid Center, was very, very instrumental. She could do some early tests just to assess where he was, and kind of be there to reassure me, have talks with me that I wasn't making things up, that there was something there that I was seeing. We saw through a small miracle, we saw the neurologist in December of 2020, had an MRI on the 22nd, had a meeting with a neuropsychologist in February, and in April of 2021, we received our diagnosis. And it was 3 days after the third lockdown started, and that one was tough. My husband he's just been phenomenal. I can't stress enough. I've been very fortunate. We've been very blessed. He has a very lovely personality. He's calm. He's very loving. He's still very thoughtful. I've found it hard because I've not said why us. It's more why him. Although I do joke all the time that if the diagnosis had been mine, he'd have to divorce me and leave me, because not being able to talk would probably have killed me. We've had a number of different people and touchstones in the medical community who have been very helpful with us, and the Alzheimer's Society was front and center. As we were leaving the diagnosis, the nurse practitioner, the nurse clinician, gave us information on the society and asked if we would give permission to be contacted anonymous. And at that point, I'm just searching for answers and trying to process what we've just learned, and said absolutely. And so some of the things that we have done is we've gone through, we were part of a first class of people through the Dalhousie School of Communication that have aphasia, because my husband's diagnosis actually falls under the frontal temporal lobe dementia group, and it's related to the language portion. So he actually has logopenic primary progressive aphasia. Big mouthful, but at the end of the day, it's to say that his primary presentation is language first, not memory, luckily not behavioral changes. So we signed on to that course. We were then quickly enrolled in Shaping the Journey, made friendships as a result of both of those classes that continue. We continue to have contact with people from the aphasia group and with Shaping the Journey. I think the things that I have had to do for myself as a caregiver or a care partner is really focus on the things that I have in my control, because so much is not in your control. So before our diagnosis, when we were kind of in the waiting room, literally waiting to be our next steps, I had a close friend suggest that I see a therapist. So I began that in February of 2020. I continue to see her, and I have changed my diet. I exercise. I make time for things that bring me joy and give me a sense of being connected to others. And it's hard for me because there's times it's very isolating. There are people who understand and they get it, and there's other people who it's just they automatically put you at the end of the diagnosis and they think your loved one is too far gone, or they're afraid it's contagious and they don't want to have too close a contact with you because they might catch it. The reality is that dementias of various types will be on the increase as our populations age. And Arlene touched on this, that age is a factor in it. My husband did everything that would be considered right. He exercised, he ate healthily. The one thing that was very hard to control was the hours he had for his work and the stress level that accompanied his work. And we know those things really impact not just your brain health when you're young, but it definitely impacts your brain health with dementia. And my husband he works hard at trying to stay connected. We try to let him have the time to finish what he needs to say, to give him a sense of mastery over the things that are still within his control. I think the hardest part of the diagnosis for us, bar none, was him being told that he could no longer drive. And he has struggled greatly with that. And I think it's that loss of independence that's been so challenging. But as a couple, we're doing well. We're in our 40th year of marriage. We will celebrate officially our 40th wedding anniversary this June. And we're blessed to be surrounded by community and people who take an interest in us, care about us, pray for us. And for me, faith has been a huge part of my journey, and choosing joy and choosing to be looking at the things that we have to be grateful and thankful for. When you first get the diagnosis, your head is absolutely swimming, and you're going through a list of, well, what now? And what does this mean for us? And you grieve, and you grieve your future, and you grieve your thoughts as to what's your life going to look like. But there are still things to be joyful about. So take control of what you can, and that includes your own health, and give your loved one the time to just be. Don't argue with them. Don't be difficult with them. Let things flow. Realize you're not going to win the argument. At the end of the day, choose joy for yourself and for your loved one, and take really good care of yourself. Thank you for the time. Catherine, over to you.
Thanks so much, Sheree. Dawn is getting her slides set up for us next, and she will be our next presenter. As you can imagine, we have so many questions coming through. So we are going to try to answer as many as we can this evening. But if your question comes up and it doesn't get answered by the moderator, then please, we're only a phone call away. And so please just call, and we can happily help support you through our info line as well. Once Dawn finishes her presentation, we'll come back together as a group. We will answer some of the questions that have come through. But like I said, there's so many supports and resources that are available to you. Being a phone call away only takes just a few moments of a call. Generally, what happens with the way our info line works right now is that you'll call and you'll either speak with someone, or if it's after hours, or if the phone line is busy, you'll get a voicemail and you can leave a voicemail. But then our colleagues on our info line team will give you a call back. If that time works for you, then that's great. If when they call you back, it's not a great time, all you have to do is say, look, not a great time for me right now. And then we're able to fix a time that's better for you, you know, and to make sure that we're reaching everything that we need to help you. The other thing that's nice is when you make that phone call to the info line, we'll do sort of an ongoing call support if that's what you need. So being able to know that someone's just going to call to check in and say, hey, how are things now? What's happening? Is there anything I can do to help? You know, just to touch base and say hello. It's that friendly voice at the other end. And if you say, look, you know, things are great, I don't need a phone call today, then that's great. And we can, you know, end the conversation there. But the nice thing is if you do need us, you can always call, and we're just a phone call away. And just as the theme of the Alzheimer's Awareness Month is, it's never too early or too late to connect. That's what it is, not only for January, but every month of the year. So no matter what happens, if you need us, just call. We're only a phone call away. And there's Dawn joining us now. Hi, Dawn, how are you?
Hi, Catherine. I'm having trouble sharing my screen. I apologize.
Don't you worry at all.
I'm
Just
going to
as I
wing
said.
it.
Okay, that sounds great too. I'll
If
leave it
that's
to you
okay,
then.
I'll send the slides
Absolutely.
later.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so thank you so much for having me today. I'm grateful, and I'm very disappointed. We did all these tries with my PowerPoint and I can't seem to figure it out. But anyway, my name is Dawn Thomas, and I'm a senior safety coordinator, one of many. Oh, I changed mine a little bit, but that's fine. We can, if you're getting that, we can work with that, Marco. Thank you. Anyway, I'm one of the senior safety coordinators, and for those of you outside of the province, this is a unique program to Nova Scotia and to our area. So I want to tell you that I am meeting with you tonight as a community care partner with the goal of sharing silver linings and happiness and community supports. But I'm also joining you tonight as a caregiver. My mother was diagnosed at an early age, in her early 60s, with early onset Alzheimer's. So I am very much aware of what it's like to live with as a caregiver and to live in a very difficult healthcare system. So one of the joys that I want to share about the senior safety programs is that we focus on safety. We're connected to the justice system. We're connected to partnership with the municipalities and also with the RCMP, local policing. And we focus a lot on, as Dr. Arlene said, frauds and scams. We focus on home security, cybersecurity, falls prevention, and lately it's becoming a lot more healthcare related. It's a one-stop shop kind of stop when you go to a senior safety coordinator, because we're able to connect you with a lot of resources, and not only specific to government resources, but also to agencies that are less formal in the community. And I'm going to share some of those with you tonight. So a lot of our healthcare related work is now taking care of people with dementia and their caregivers. And we recognize what a difficult job and how challenging it is to navigate the healthcare system. Slide 3, Marco. So the success of our programs is that we are tailored to each family situation. So what happens with one family might be different than another family. And we take into account the experience and history of each family. And we are very senior focused, especially when it comes to elder abuse issues. We want to attend to the needs of the senior, not so much the family. So how do we do this? We do one-to-one visits, and before COVID, we were doing public presentations. As Anne-Sheree said, we can talk about maybe some of the more frauds, scams, and recognize that there are issues such as driving that become an issue with dementia. So some of the work that we do is specific to dementia. I think slide 3, if we're still on that, is driving. driving with dementia has become an issue for seniors in general. So we would do driving classes and try to encourage people to keep their driver's license for as long as possible, but to do it in a safe way. There's a lot of steps to remember when you come to an intersection, pressing the brakes, putting on your indicators. When do you advance? When do you not advance? There's third lanes now in highways that we don't know how to operate. And there's also roundabouts that are kind of a challenge. But specifically with dementia, as Sheree mentioned, that was a loss for her husband, and it's a loss for a lot of people. As I said, there are a lot of steps to remember. We encourage people to take familiar routes, drive in the daytime, and do what they can. But there is a point in time where you do need to stop driving. I remember one day my mom and I were heading in for groceries in town, and she backed up from my driveway and said, "I don't know which way to go." And that was a sign for us to take care of the car and hide the keys for a little bit until we got some help. Another problem that becomes an issue for us in the senior safety world is wandering. So wandering is something that happens when people get more confused and they're looking for things from the past, or they have a direction they want to go in. My mom often decided she was going to walk to town, and we didn't even realize she was gone until a neighbor brought her back. And that was also a real challenge for us. So we're able to refer for safety equipment, like the Alzheimer's Society has a program. There's also connections that we have with ground search and rescue, fire departments, and EMO. If we know that there's someone in the area that might prone to wander, that we're going to have a community watch out for them. There are lots of phone apps and projects and programs that might help families who are dealing with wandering. And for us, we went with Project Lifesaver just because we wanted to find my mom. We didn't want to lose her. And she liked having the bracelet from the cute guy from EMO who came to help her out. So that was helpful. One of the other things that we would pay attention to is estate planning. So Anne and I were talking about this yesterday, how difficult it is to know that there is a bit of urgency in making plans for your power of attorney, your personal directive, and your will. As you're progressing in the disease, there's an opportunity that you won't be able to make those decisions at some point. So unfortunately, in the senior safety world, because we're connected with the police and we often see people in crisis situations, sometimes it's too late to make those plans. And then if there's a referral to adult protection, then ultimately the government might be taking over some of your care that your family could really do a better job at. We also always recommend talking to a lawyer and getting independent legal counsel. You can work through the Legal Information Society of Nova Scotia for help. And also the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia has some really great videos on their website, which will help you. And we also can make referrals in those situations to continuing care. And that's a lot of the time what we do is encourage you to make that call to the 800 number to get yourself on a list to see what programs you qualify, get some support at home if you need it through either home care or private support. And there's also respite support, although through COVID lately, it's been a bit more challenging. I will connect you to some of the boarding homes now who have been very creative in taking in private care people to just give caregivers a break, which is great. And we are able to help you with those connections as well. So as I mentioned before, we also get referrals from the police. So that means sometimes it's a crisis situation. So we have to be very creative in thinking, and particularly during COVID times. So slide 4, this is it. Stay right, you can go back. That'd be great. So some of the connections for the more formal supports that you might have would be your healthcare practitioners. So that would be doctors, nurse practitioners, and capacity clinics like Dr. Arlene is running, which is great. Continuing care programs, as I mentioned, the 800-225-7225. There are programs that help with caregiver benefits, help at home for cooking, cleaning, bathing, and placement discussions for long-term care. And I found when I ran the support group in my area, it was very difficult for people to reach out and to realize that maybe there's a wait list or there's decisions to be made, and that's tough. There's also help for getting groceries now and transportation options that are out there, and all of the counties might have a transportation service, and I think a lot of them have help for people who are on limited incomes, which is also great. There are private care agencies and more formal ones like the home support. Home support you access through continuing care, but there are private care workers out there who are running their own business or just doing it individually, who are fantastic at helping and taking care of people. And often it's easier to have one person coming, and that's what we did for my mom. We hired privately. We were fortunate enough to do that, and that's an option out there too. And I think a lot of people are realizing that it's a great business opportunity as well. As our population ages, it's good to have support. We're connected to adult protection, and adult protection, for those of you who don't know, is there for people who have memory problems and dementia, and who are living at extreme risk and are living in an unsafe manner. So we can connect people to those, and often they're not in the community, they're often alone with dementia. So one of the things we might do is go in and check out what's the food like in the fridge, are they paying their bills, how are they feeling, are there electrical issues, that sort of thing. So we can make those connections as well, but we'd really rather not and be a little bit more proactive. So the other thing, as Dr. Arlene mentioned, capacity clinics, it's really important to get an early diagnosis to rule out vitamin deficiencies or infections. And it's really also difficult to access if you live in a rural area and you don't have a health practitioner or a doctor. So sometimes we're able to help make some connections there. You can also head to outpatients department and they will also set you up, hopefully. And there's also connections with our hospital social workers. So we try to connect people with those people too, who can help, especially if there's housing issues or there's challenges with transportation and that sort of stuff, eating. Okay, next slide, please, would be great. So there are other community supports, and I think these ones are very important. I believe most people are aware of the 211 program. In Nova Scotia, you call 211 and you can set yourself up with any community resource that they have. They contact us all the time. Who's in charge of the support group in your area? What are the church programs and that sort of stuff? So that is a great resource. I also mentioned when I updated my slides, the positive aging guide for seniors put out through the Nova Scotia Department of Health and Long-Term Care has a lot of connections in there. And often those guides are just at the base of your grocery store or pharmacy. We also connect with the RCMP. This is a less preventative and a more of a reaction sort of connection, because the RCMP aren't able to diagnose dementia. So they're not going to take away your license if you have a memory problem. Rather, it's going to happen after you've had an accident, which is too bad. But this stuff does happen. I would say never underestimate the power of neighbors, families, and friends. And I know sometimes there's a lot of people out there who really want to help, but just are afraid to get involved. And we've been taking care of some neighbors here in our area lately. And you know what? It's just going in and saying hello or making a phone call. And that's really good for them. So the transportation systems in all of our areas I mentioned, there's transit buses, private transportation companies, and they often support people with low income. The other thing is communities in Nova Scotia, there's a new grant that's out this year, and you can apply for up to $500 if you're under a certain income, and you can get help with transportation, grocery delivery, and delivery for medications, which is great. There's service groups and organizations that are out there that are really handy and helpful. In the beginning of COVID, our senior safety programs were given some finances to assist the seniors in our community, to make sure that they had groceries, that they were getting the help that they needed. We reached out to the Lions Club, Chamber of Commerce, several churches, fire halls, Knights of Columbus, that sort of thing. And they are more than willing and even better at doing it for their own tiny communities, because they're aware of who's there, who goes to their church, who's at risk in their community. So they're doing a lot of great stuff as well. So there's also respite opportunities. As I mentioned, through continuing care, you could, before COVID, access a respite bed for a break. But now, as I said, the boarding homes in my area are being a little bit more creative and taking on people for a week at a time rather than to live there forever. And there's also a bunch of private care organizations and private care workers who are willing to come and stay the night with you for a while and give your caregiver a break, or give the caregiver a break if that's what's needed. And sometimes it is what's needed. And again, the support groups online, they're online now, but there are several out there. And I know I will talk a bit about some of them. The VON in my area has had one for a long time. The Caregivers Nova Scotia and the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia are all holding support groups, and it's easy to reach out to those and be part. And I remember when I started going to our support group, the best part of it was not feeling like I was alone. There were people in the room who had been a little bit further ahead in our dementia journey than we were and had great advice. And it's nice to shake your head and feel, you know what, I'm not isolated and I'm not alone in this. Slide 6. So I renamed this slide, and I'm so sorry I can't see it, but I put this as community champions because these groups, a lot of them are not getting funding. They're doing their own funding, but yet they're doing great work. And the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia has a phone support program. They have programs used to have programs in person, but Shaping the Journey, as Sheree mentioned. They have online learning opportunities, phone art education series, the Wandering Registry, tips and tricks, which is great. I remember taking my mom for a sandwich at a sub shop once, and she ordered a chicken salad sub with chocolate sauce. And I was totally embarrassed. How can she have chocolate on a chicken? Well, you can get those little cards, like the person I am with has dementia, and you just pass it over. Those little things make a big difference, especially for my mom that day, even though I just let her get the chocolate sauce. Anyway, Caregivers Nova Scotia, another very helpful organization. They are doing support groups, not specific to dementia, but also doing a lot of phone support right now. And they have a fantastic website that has a lot of resources in different communities and different different counties on how you can access what is specific to your area. They also do phone support, which is also great. And the VON, they have been doing support groups in my area. They do phone warm lines. They're doing meal delivery, adult day programs. And not only that, they're helping with nursing. I had a caregiver in my area recently who got sent to the hospital for several weeks, and the VON contacted me, and we came up with a plan to make sure that his wife would be safe while he was in the hospital, and touch base with him every day. And I'm really impressed that in small rural communities, we're able to take care of that kind of stuff and take care of our neighbors. There's also fall buttons. I have here in Touch and Lifeline, but there are several different agencies where you can get a fall button, and some of those are also have medication dispensers or wandering apps and incontinence response, and they have some really cool stuff. Cook Stop. So if you're cooking or your loved one is cooking and you're worried about them burning the place down, you can arrange it so it shuts off in 5 minutes. There are some really neat programs there too. Yeah, and there's lots of online support, and you please be careful when you're on social media, when you're on Facebook, but there are a lot of really neat things out there too, which I think I'm going to touch on after. Okay, next slide's fine. So this is community programs. So there are a lot of recreation programs right now, and they are very active in recognizing that there are issues out there that need to be addressed. So some of them are doing things like memory cafes or memory boot camps. My recreation department is doing hikes for seniors. They're also doing art programs, sing-alongs, bingos, that sort of stuff, which is great that other people are recognizing and participating and helping take care of each other in our own communities, which is great. Yep, next slide. Recognize need. So this is my mom. I would like to just say to you that she allowed me to use her story to share, use my forum and her story to share our journey, and I'm really grateful that I got to do that, because it's been fun to share with other people. She didn't die of dementia, but she lived with it, and we found several silver linings and special moments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dawn. And now I'm going to invite Sheree and Dr. Kelly-Wiggins to come back and join us. There we are.
I'm here.
Yeah. We'll just wait. There's Dr. Kelly-Wiggins. Everyone, I have to say thank you so much. You have given us all such amazing insight, you know, each in your own field, and just brought so much to the table this evening. I can't say thank you. As I sat here and listened, you know, there was just so much that I gained from each of you. And I always say to people, it's like that Oprah aha moment. And so there was something from each one of you that just, you know, gave me a little song in my heart and brought something back to the forefront of my mind. And so I thank you all for coming together. You've given us so much to think about and shared so much. As you can imagine, we have a ton of questions that have come through. So I'm going to just kind of pick through some of the questions. Please, everyone, know that if your question didn't get answered this evening, please reach out to the info line, and that number will come back up on your screen so that we can support the questions that have come through, okay, if yours isn't one. So Dr. Arlene Kelly-Wiggins, I have a question for you. Should I have a memory test or see a specialist like yourself once I reach a certain age? And if not, at what point should I try to search out to get help?
So, we did ask the question as dementia specialists whether it would be valuable or worthwhile to screen asymptomatic people as a matter of course. So say if we screen everybody who turned 65 with a memory test. And when we looked at the results, people didn't fare any better for having been screened while they were asymptomatic. So we don't recommend a certain age cutoff. We just say, if you're having challenges with memory and thinking, and you have symptoms that we described in the discussion previously, that's the time to come and see your family doctor or primary health clinic and maybe assess whether seeking a diagnosis is appropriate at that time.
Great. Thank you so much. Dawn, our next question is for you. Somebody had asked, you know, there's a lot of programs that you're talking about that say senior. They're wondering at what age would that be open to people? And are the programs that you mentioned tonight available across the province? And is there any cost to them?
So I think the definition of a senior depends on if you're going to Shoppers Drug Mart or you're doing something in a hospital, which is difficult. I know in the senior safety programs, we don't discriminate. I mean, I've had people with memory issues in their early 50s, and we're not in that business. We take care of everyone. The programs are across the province, and I do recommend that anyone reaching out to any of the community programs I mentioned, you can access them through 211 or your local MLA's office to find out, or you know what, even our senior safety programs are in the Positive Aging Guide or on the Nova Scotia Department of Seniors and Long-Term Care websites, and we can help with that too.
Great, thank you. I got the seniors discount at Shoppers Drug Mart not that long ago.
I'm gonna get
And Sheree, our next question is for you. And we have lots of beautiful comments coming in, Sheree, to say thank you for sharing the story that you and Doug for both being so brave. So thank you for that. Someone asked, did you find that people treated you both differently when you shared your diagnosis, and how did you deal with that?
We've been very, very fortunate that most people have not treated us differently. I think it depends on the level of closeness in the relationship. One thing that I was called to task for by my daughter was not sharing as much, because then if my husband happened to run into somebody that he had a long-standing relationship with and hadn't seen in the last little while, and they didn't know what was going on, they would have thought he was maybe under the influence or just being rude or just didn't remember them. And we actually had an incident like that happen where the person was very hurt, thinking that he didn't remember her, and he actually didn't remember her name. But what he was doing was frantically searching his memory banks while he was talking to her. So he appeared distracted and disconnected because he was hoping to answer the question. So we've been, for the most part, our experience has been extremely positive. People have been very supportive, and you know, but you also have to temper your own expectations. Like everybody on this road, when they get a diagnosis, whether they're the spouse or the extended family or the person with the diagnosis, you are going to have different stages of coming to grips with that diagnosis and your willingness to share it and your own processing in your grief, because there is grief involved in realizing your world has changed.
And Sheree, just to confirm, your husband was like 58, almost 59 when he
yes, when we started noticing symptoms. And you know, I was just sharing with Beth that he had said to me that prior to this actual formally, I guess, me seeing symptoms, was he'd had these moments where the fog would roll in, as he called it. Like he'd have this fog come into his brain, and I asked him what he would do, and he said, I'd just go lay down. And you know, he had a shift that was very demanding, so I would have attributed it, had he told me, to just his shift work. But the challenge is that they often don't, your loved one often doesn't understand what's happening to them and may not share it with you. So you're kind of in the dark. You have to be observant and go with your gut.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Dr. Wiggins, I have for you. So someone said, I feel that I have someone in my family who may have a dementia. We don't have a family doctor. And so I'm wondering what your suggestion would be to us. And if in making a diagnosis, can a family doctor make a diagnosis and support that person with medication if we were to get in with, not able to get in with a specialist at the time?
So to the second part, definitely lots of family doctors diagnose and manage dementia and do it very, very well. They will often be able to call a dementia specialist, and if they need a little bit of extra input or support. If you don't have a family doctor, that complicates the situation. So we receive referrals from the emergency room, from walk-in clinics, from nurse practitioners. In Cape Breton now, we've had some primary care clinics specifically for patients without family doctors. So they're nurse practitioner operated, but they do have the support of a doc for a certain number of hours a week. So we do see a lot of referrals coming from that source. So I think most family doctors are comfortable with diagnosing and treating dementia. And the other question, so we see people referred from any primary care practitioner or even a specialist. So most memory clinics are usually accepting of those types of referrals.
That's great, thank you. Don, a quick question that came in. If I was worried about or suspected sort of elder abuse in the apartment complex that I live in, could I contact a senior safety coordinator in my region if I was worried about that person? And how would I go about finding or connecting with you as a senior safety person?
Absolutely. I think it's imperative that you do reach out to the senior safety programs or the police. And all of us have police in our area. And as I mentioned, the senior safety coordinators, there's usually one per every county, sometimes two. There's a couple of counties in Nova Scotia still working on it, but for the most part, we can be very creative and senior focused, where we're not going to go in there and say, your son is abusing you. We want him to be arrested. And we take a more restorative approach and a senior focused approach and recognize that there's family history and there's a lot of experience there. So yes, absolutely do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And the last one I'll say, Anne Sheree, not really a question, but just a beautiful comment that I thought I would share. And there were so many, but I just thought this one was lovely. They said, thank you so much for being so brave, for sharing the story of you and Doug and hearing the positives that you've gained as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. And it's been my joy and pleasure to be able to be here tonight. And I just want to thank the Alzheimer's Society again for the amount of support you've provided to our family and the community at large. And it's made a difference in our lives, and it can make a difference for anyone else out there who's searching for help and a lifeline. And I just think all the participants were awesome tonight. It was educational for me too.
Wonderful. Thank you all, ladies, so much for your beautiful stories, your time and your talent and your answers to questions that I know, cause you to think on your feet after, organizing and putting everything together and coming into this tech world. We certainly appreciate each and every one of you.